Hey everyone, it's Mason Warren here with Warren Teaching. I am here to talk about an article called The Flipped Classroom, and it's by Sarah Delozier and Matthew Rhodes. So, to start out, we're just going to talk about what is a flipped classroom. And in just a really general sense, it refers to any classroom of assigning lectures outside of class and then devoting actual class time to learning activities. So there's a whole lot of different varying degrees of flipped classrooms. But even with all these different degrees, there's really very little evidence that there's better outcomes from flipped classrooms than there is from what we would call traditional classrooms. But a lot of this is because there's not been enough research to prove correlation between the two things, or causation, I guess, between the two things. But there is pros and cons of each that we can look at and weigh the pros versus the cons and see what we get. So the pros, you got more time in class. Obviously, if they're watching lectures at home, they're spending that time at home, and then you can do other things in class. A con is, they have to be able to access that lecture at home. So if you're in an area where kids might not have access to computers or the internet, then you might have to stay away from this. Another pro is it allows students to take the lectures at their own pace. They can pause and take notes or rewind and listen to stuff over again. A con to that, though, is they can't ask questions and get instant feedback. Now, they can email you, but there is a time delay. And it puts more pressure on students, right? People are busier and busier. Right now is probably the busiest time in humanity. People are doing 25 different activities every night, and this is one more thing that they have to do before they come to class. Because if they don't watch the lecture before class, then they'll just be lost the whole time they're doing an activity. It also allows for a higher level. I'll put Bloom's taxonomy down there. They can do the remembering, understanding at home, doing those lower level learnings that you need to build that top part of the cake. You have to build those base layers before you can build on top, but it takes time. And with a flipped classroom, you can do that at home, and then you can facilitate the top part of the cake. But it also requires a lot of work. You have to record all the lectures ahead of time. It can't be a night before type thing. You have to know what you're going to teach and how you're going to teach it, and you have to edit it and do all the work to it to make a video. So you might ask yourself, if you're doing away with lectures, what are you going to do with your class time? Well, it allows you to do more one-on-one learning for those students who didn't quite get all those connections made at home. Some students, they may watch it at home and be like, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. But other students might have more trouble. And with a lecture of a big class, you have to go on. You can't stop for too long. You can stop for a little bit, but you can't stop for too long when someone gets behind. But with this one, all the people who it made sense to have gone ahead, and these students, you can have time for one-on-one learning. You can do probably the most traditional flipped classroom is problem sets, where you do what would traditionally be homework in the classroom, so they can ask you questions on the homework. You can do further concepts, those higher levels, the higher tiers of the cake on Bloom's taxonomy. You can try to hit those higher tiers or push the concept further past its base. These are group projects or labs where you're working together. Student-led activities or student-centered activities. This is where they come up with their own activities. But you have to have that base knowledge before you can come up with those questions or come up with the means to test those questions. Socratic seminar, and that's the same thing as before. It's a student-led question-based seminar where they take turns, basically a discussion. Pair and share activities. This is where students pair up and share what they find. You can send them out and have them do research, and then they come back together and say what they found. So in conclusion, we have looked at the pros and the cons, but we did see that there is no definitive evidence that this is helpful in and of itself. But we know that maybe the lectures themselves, watching the lectures at home by itself, might not be too helpful. But we do know for sure that student-led activities and Socratic seminars and just really shifting the focus from the teacher onto the student, that does help learning. And whenever you do this flipped classroom, you have more time for that. So in a sense, we do know that flipped classrooms help the learner more than a traditional classroom would. So this has been a good article, and if you're interested in doing a flipped classroom, this would be a great article to read. And it's full of references, probably, I don't know, 90 or more references. So even if you are looking for other resources for flipped classroom or other information on flipped classrooms, this is a great place to start, and then you can go out from there.